Welcome. I'm Amanda Watson. I'm the Associate Dean here at Harvard Law School for Library and Information, and it is my honor to welcome you to our Harvard Law School Library Magna Carta celebration. There are many people who made today's celebration possible, and you will get to meet some of them today, but there are many others, and I want to take a moment to specifically thank some of them. Our communications team, led by Jeff Neal, has partnered us at every moment in this process. Our security team has diligently kept what we call HLS MS-172 safe, as well as all of us, and we thank them. Our library team, specifically Teresa Knapp and Maya Bergamesco, who are the reason that we can do all of this today. And finally, our fantastic historic and special collections team, who, along with the historians you'll meet later, are the reason that we're here. And many of them are in this room, so I'm going to just thoroughly embarrass them by recognizing them now. Our former head of special collections, KB Beck, our current Chris Spraker, along with all of the wonderful team, Mary Person, Sarah Wharton, Leslie Schoenfeld, Ed Malloy, Margaret Dalton, Katie Creakies, Sarah Pryor-Nelson, Jane Freeman, and our Harvard Library Conservation technician, Terry Messina, as well as our digital team, Leanne Pearson and Irene Harris, who are led in part by the wonderful Leah Prescott. A few reminders before we get started. This event is being live streamed, recorded, and photographed for various platforms, including social media. If you have any questions, there's an ambassador in the lobby that can help you. There are restrooms on the first floor. You're on the second floor now, so just stay on one. There's an elevator or stairs in the hallway. There's also water in the hallway. If you are here in person and you would like a private viewing of the document this afternoon, there is still availability, so just see the ambassador in the lobby and we can arrange that for you. Before I start, it's my honor to welcome a very special guest to welcome us. Martha Whitehead is the Vice President for the Harvard Library, University Librarian, and the Roy E. Larson Librarian for the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. Thank you, Martha, so much for being with us.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. Can you hear me okay? That's right? Okay, great. So really, I'm here on behalf of all of Harvard Library just to say how excited we are about this discovery and today's celebration. It was actually quite some time ago that our Associate University Librarian, Tom Hyre, who is always a really good judge of what I should know about, he sent me an email and it said, 2 scholars have discovered that the engrossment of the 1300 Magna Carta that the Harvard Law School owns is more rare, important, and valuable than they realized. And his note ended with, a pretty big deal and good thing. So yes, indeed. And as Amanda has said in various venues, this story really exemplifies what we care about in libraries, and that's enabling scholars' discovery of and engagement with a vast range of information and cultural resources, and preserving those resources for future generations. So what I've seen from where I sit in this whole story is that it really does take a village to raise a Magna Carta. The first email string from Tom involved Amanda Hegarty, the Special Collections Conservator in Harvard Library, who had designed the housing for Magna Carta, along with the 3 people on today's panel, who, of course, you're going to hear more from them shortly, Leah Prescott and John Overholt, who considered how best to address matters of both access and security, and Debora Mayer, who led the UV and spectral imaging analysis that confirmed the authenticity of, yes, as we cryptically refer to it, HLS MS-172. And then I subsequently learned that David Remington in Harvard Library's Imaging Services team can talk about the creation of 3 versions of the digital object and how different techniques used to capture the images subtly highlight different aspects of the document. And of course, Chris Spraker, the manager of historical and special collections here at the Law School Library, has just been an incredible collaborator and a kind of a link between all these people, a wonderful colleague throughout this whole amazing story. And then there are just countless others across the library who will engage with scholars in their research that will be inspired by this work. We have an amazing community of experts here at Harvard Library, and we're all thrilled to see the excitement that this discovery has generated amongst researchers far afield and also close to home here at Harvard. So very excited to be here and really looking forward to this panel. Thank you all for doing it. Thanks, Amanda. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Martha. And now it's time for our first panel. We're going to talk about the importance of the work that we do as librarians, archivists, curators, conservators. And I am joined by fantastic minds in this area. First, I want to introduce Leah Prescott. Leah is currently the Senior Administrator of Library Resources at the Mystic Seaport Museum. She was previously our Associate Director for Collections and also a co-interim director here at Harvard Law School Library. And she also served as Associate Director for Digital Initiatives and Special Collections at Georgetown Law Center. She has an MLS, Master's in Library Science and Information Studies, and a BA in American History. So this is a fun day. John Overholt is the curator of the Donald and Mary Hyde collection of Samuel Johnson and early modern books and manuscripts at Houghton Library here at Harvard University. Before serving as assistant curator and Hyde cataloger at Houghton, John was a rare books cataloger at the Harry Ransom Humanities Research Center at the University of Texas at Austin, and he also holds a master's in library and science and information. And finally, Debora Mayer is the conservator for analytical services and technical imaging at the Weissman Preservation Center here at Harvard, where she provides specialized examination, analysis, and imaging of Harvard library collections. She has an MS in art conservation, specializing in paper conservation, and is a fellow of the American Institute of Conservation, an expert in analysis of materials used in paper making, and teaches courses in fiber microscopy. So welcome to our panel. Thank you. So when we were doing media around the Magna Carta, we had several interesting locations of questions about library work. One was this idea that we found Magna Carta somewhere. I had one very prominent newspaper reporter say, "Where did you find it? What was it under?" Right? I had another say, "How long did it sit neglected after it was digitized? We want to know how many years it sat with no one knowing what it was." And so we decided to start this day of celebration by talking about the everyday, very important work that we do that neglects nothing and actually leaves nothing under a filing cabinet to be found. So let me start just very generally and ask you, John, about Harvard's approach to preservation. Why is it part of our work, and sort of the scope and scale, which would be an entire hour. So we'll ask you to give it in just a few minutes.
Yeah, I'll do my best. I like to point out that Harvard is named for a gift of books. There was also some money involved, but books were a really big part of it. John Harvard's library and his gift of that was the founding of the Harvard Library. So we have been collecting books and other kinds of information containing objects at Harvard for a very long time, coming up on 4 centuries. Many of the things we hold as rare books today were bought for the library when they were new books, and they've become rare over time. I would say mostly in the 19th century, we started to have a greater awareness that you didn't just need the newest published things in order to meet the research needs of your faculty and students, that it was important to have historical collections as well that can serve as the raw material of history, the primary sources that we dig into in order to understand the past. And so we've, for many years now, also been acquiring things as rare materials and keeping them in our special collections and making them available for researchers today, and doing everything in our power to make sure that they'll be around for researchers for many years to come.
Wonderful. And Leah, I'll ask you to build on that and talk about digitization and why we digitize.
Yeah, so just as John was mentioning access, that obviously is one of the main reasons we digitize, to provide access to the rich resources that we have in our collections to the people who cannot visit in person, which also creates equity in terms of access to information. We digitize for discovery purposes, and this is an absolutely wonderful case to prove that that is a valuable reason for digitization. Previously unknown materials that can advance scholarship. We digitize for preservation of the physical object, in that by digitization we can reduce the handling of that physical object. Although I will say that with every new digital object, we have a whole new preservation challenge that has its own set of requirements. So most of the time, digitization isn't really a checklist, but it's a strategy. And sometimes that strategy is to perform production digitization or mass digitization, and then the analysis that you have to do and the reasons for digitization have to be assessed at a broader level rather than at each individual object level. And we start by asking some key questions. Is the material heavily used? Is it fragile or deteriorating? Does it have historical or legal significance that makes broader access urgent or more important? And crucially, can it be handled safely? And can it be adequately described? Because that context is critical as well. I'll mention that here at the Harvard Law Library, the special a couple of people who are here, Chris Spraker is here, and Jessica Chappell, who's now at the Boston Public Library, developed a new processing strategy, which was called integrated appraisal. I don't know if you're still calling it that or not, but it's now somewhat the standard operating procedure, and it allows for surfacing of items that are historically valuable or highly requested or visually rich by, it flips the process on its head a little bit by traditionally, a collection, we're talking primarily about manuscript collections in this instance, is completely processed. The traditional approach is you get all of your ducks in a row in terms of everything that you know about it, and then you digitize it. But there are opportunities to make that process more efficient if you put digitization earlier in the process. So that's one of the things that is a little revolutionary that is happening here. But selection is collaborative, so it involves archivists, curators, conservation experts, and digital strategy teams. And as I mentioned earlier, preservation of that digital object has to be part of the plan from the beginning. It isn't something that you say, oh, we'll think about that later. Ideally, that happens a lot, but ideally that's not what you do. And the preservation strategies around digital objects are significantly different in that with a physical object, your goal is to create an adequate, ideal environment for it. You do the activities that you need to make it stable, and then you try to leave it alone because, you try to leave it alone. With digital objects, it's a constant and repeating intervention that is what's going to create that preserved digital object. And it's important to do that because that digitization represents a significant investment in, so it's not something that you can have a strategy where you produce these digital images and then throw them away. It's not economically a feasible strategy. So overall, the goal is to digitize with intent, prioritizing relevance, accessibility, and value. And sometimes long-term goal is comprehensiveness, where we can say that the whole of something is digitized, even if not all of the individual pieces would necessarily pass all of the tests that you have.
Great, thank you. And finally, Debora, let's talk a little bit about conservation in our collections. And I think we can quickly do away with the idea that conservation means book repair. And you can shed the light on the universe that is conservation.
So I just want to build upon what Leah and John said. It's conservation is an integral and collaborative process with all the people involved with collections. So curators, librarians, collection managers. It also involves imaging services over there. And it is a discussion to determine the best level of intervention for the object to meet needs of access, but critical to preserve the historical evidence of the object. So there's an ongoing conversation that takes place to balance all the desires of access and preservation of evidence. I was asked about how we decide what items to conserve, and I want to throw it back. It is always the repositories. We work with repositories' priorities. So they set their priorities and then come to us. And we have several workflows, and typical workflows include stabilizing items for digitization, exhibition and loans, collections care, sort of routine maintenance for handling, requests for teaching and learning, especially in use in classrooms. And then there's this slightly new workflow that I want to share with you, and that is the case with the Magna Carta to offer specialized or technical imaging, in this case to enhance the legibility of damaged text. So conservation, the Weissman Center now offers a workflow for specialized imaging and material analysis to help address issues of legibility, connoisseurship, and material composition. So we have added a scientist to our team, and so we can offer more complete understanding of an object as needed. Requests for this kind of work can be initiated by faculty, so that's you out there, your students, library patrons, researchers internally, researchers externally, like our professors over there. And then these requests are reviewed by the repository, the associated repository for approval, and they're put in queue. And we hope we deliver as successfully as we have done with the Magna Carta. So I want to make sure that you guys know this opportunity. It's pretty fantastic, and it happens on a daily basis, but not, like John was saying, there's these small discoveries that happen with students and faculty and teachers all the time. Maybe not the Magna Carta, but forwarding research.
Amanda, can I just add what a pleasure it is as a curator to work with the incredibly skilled folks at the Weissman Preservation Center who do just miraculous things to make our collections stable and safe and usable. And I only wish there were 10 times more of them, because fighting entropy is always a difficult battle, and there's so much more that we could do. But it is really a pleasure to be able to call on those abilities for the sake of the collections.
Agreed. So now let's talk about Magna Carta. We have a lovely reproduction here, in part from our own team, so you can look while we talk about this. Leah, let's talk about how this started. In 2023, we've been talking about this for a little while, and even before 2023, 172 was a well-loved document. It was something that we cherished. We saw something special in it. That's why we bought it. That's why we digitized it. But talk a little bit about what happened. I think you got an email, maybe, is what started this, or a phone call.
So again, this is a great case for how discoverability is such an important part of why we digitize. But yes, it was just before, literally right before we were leaving for holiday break in 2023. And Mary Person came into who deals with all of our rare books. She came into her office in the morning to a ringing phone and many, many, many emails from a professor in the UK who wanted to talk about something that was very important. And so Mary connected with Professor Vincent, I believe. That was who we first connected with, and he told us what they suspected. And in conversations, we determined what were things that were needed to happen in order for them to be able to continue their investigation of the document. And I believe Professor Carpenter had been just generally looking at Magna Cartas that had been digitized and were online, and comparing them against known originals. So that's how the whole thing started with on their end, on their side of the pond. So in order for them to continue, they needed, first of all, the scan that we had at 300 dpi did not have the verso. So they needed the verso, and they needed a higher resolution. So we
And
produced.
just to translate, the verso is the back.
Oh, yeah, the back. The back, and recto's the front, verso's the back. And so as soon as we got back from the holiday, we produced a 600 DPI scan of both the front and the back and provided that to the researchers. And then also a significant amount of time was then the Historical and Special Collections did a heroic job at that point in time of trying to discover, going through every collection that we could find that might have some information about how we acquired the document. Found the accession log, which gave us, very minimal information, but it told us how much we paid for it and who the dealer was that we got it through. Any information that we could find on the provenance was desired, so there was an unprocessed collection of the, I think it was the library director, right? The library director collection, it was the director of the library.
That's correct, yes, the librarian's
Yeah.
papers, that's what, yeah.
Librarian's papers from the time unprocessed, so they turned their time away from a lot of the work that they had been doing to process that collection and comb it for any evidence of the provenance of this. Because the document itself is challenging to read, there's a lot that's very, very faint. So it was decided that the combination of the comparison work and the provenance discovery was going to be what needed to happen. And we had cataloged this. It was known, it was cataloged, it was thought to be from the descriptions that were provided at the time of purchase, which was in 1946, that it was a sheriff's copy. So, which there are many more of those than there are originals. So let's see. After that, and I'll let Debora talk more about it, but we wanted to see if we could get reduce some of that illegibility, make it a little more legible. And so
Okay.
ultimately contacted Debora.
So the story continues, and Leah reached out to Imaging Services and said, can you image it in ultraviolet light? And they said, no, we can't, but I know who can. And
And Debora, can you say a word about why we would look at it in ultraviolet
yes,
light?
so I'm going to
yeah.
go right to the end of my little thing. Well, you can see, here it is. It's kind of a wreck, okay?
It's a beautiful wreck.
It's a beautiful wreck. It's shades of brown. It is brown ink on stained parchment, okay? So the letters, when you look up close, they're blurry. They're very hard to make out. And only people who know what it should say have any hint of what it actually says. So, not me. But I know from experience that in ultraviolet light, that brown ink will appear darker. So it absorbs and it becomes darker. In addition, we're really lucky because parchment fluoresces in ultraviolet light. So it appears lighter. So when you take an image in ultraviolet light, it's just it's a technique so that you're able to create much higher contrast between the parchment and the letters. And so it's this combination with this particular wavelength for this particular situation that it will help the researchers be able to read most every word, especially because they kind of know what words should be there. So, and this technical imaging, I just want to say, is a catch-all term to describe a whole slew of techniques that manipulate lighting and wavelengths. So it's not just restricted to this particular situation, but it's a technique that you can reveal hidden or obscured things that our eyes, which have a limited wavelengths that we can see in, but if we image things in other wavelengths and capture them, then they become visible for us and researchers.
That's wonderful. I'm going to ask you, John, we've been talking specifically about Magna Carta, but I know at Houghton you see researchers from all over the world every day. And Debora said a little bit about connection before, but could you talk about why this is important to an institution like Harvard and sort of the impact that you see of this work?
Yeah, I think it would be kind of sad and kind of pointless if we accumulated all this amazing historical stuff and just kept it locked away in our basement and did not make it accessible to anyone. I am, as a curator, really excited about the cool things we have, and I want to make everybody else as excited as I am. So we share our collections in a number of ways. We put up exhibitions that are free and open to the public to come and see things that we've hopefully given them some contextualization about why this is interesting and important. We host at Houghton 200 classes a year, some mostly from Harvard, but not exclusively, so that students have the opportunity to come in and see firsthand the originals of things that they're studying in their classes. And we have a reading room in the library where an international community of researchers can come and work hands-on with the materials in our collection. I am very proud of the fact that you don't have to be a Harvard affiliate. You don't have to have special qualifications. We require a photo ID and freshly washed hands, and that's about it. And you can come to our reading room and call up a thing from the catalog and have it plop down in front of you and spend as much time with it as you wish. There are a few instances where we can't do that for everything in the collection because it is extremely fragile, and the interest in it is so high that it really would conflict too much with the preservation mission to just make it available at every opportunity. But for the vast majority of our collections, that opportunity exists, and that's how we fulfill our mission to serve research, is by making these materials available.
And I think because of Houghton's specialized knowledge and facilities, that was why we decided that the Magna Carta, which had been in the vault here at the law school library, would be well served to be in the vault at Houghton. So between John and Tom Hyde and myself, we sort of came to an agreement about it. So it's now well protected and cared for.
Yes, we did love having it at Houghton before our announcement, and now it's in an undisclosed location after its visit today, so we'll keep it very safe. Debora, let's talk about the future. One of our favorite topics. What do you see as the work of conservation, and your work especially, which I think some people think of as like forensics work? It seems very exciting, and especially why it's important that we continue to invest in work in conservation.
Well, of course, I love looking at objects, which is what got me into conservation. So I can always look up and close to things. So for me, preserving material and contextual evidence of collections is critical for future generations. Being able to experience the real, the tangible item is powerful. It's transformative. They're full of life and they're very rich. They have color, they have textures, they have distortions, they show effects of time and history and use become present. And I'll contend that no single image can capture all of that, or at least not yet. But imaging is a pathway to discovery and understanding, dissemination, access, but it's not it's not a surrogate for the real object. And if you look at this, like, you can't see all the ripples and you can't see the texture of that parchment. I mean, it's just going to blow your mind when you see it up in life. And it just takes on a much more enriching experience when you can do that.
Yes, I had the pleasure of watching Professors Vincent and Carpenter see it in person for the first time yesterday. And they're both very lovely, as you'll see in a few moments, but they were, I think, very moved by being in its presence for the first time, even though they had literally been studying every letter of it for quite some time. And it is very moving to be in the presence of these documents.
And we could see them seeing new things
Yes,
by having the
yes.
chance to see the original.
Yes,
in
John
person.
and I got to stand just over them as they were doing their work. And John, I would ask you, so let's put a point on this. If we have these things beautifully digitized, and Leah has taken it to 600 DPI, and Debora has taken it to ultraviolet, why would we continue to spend money to preserve it and store it? And this is true of Magna Carta or of any of our collections.
I am very interested in the idea of textual artifacts that are sort of imbued with real world power, like an indulgence in the Renaissance era was a piece of paper that could get you out of purgatory. That's a pretty amazing power that demons have to respect your piece of paper.
Spoken like a librarian, truly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not, just that the words exist. They sort of have to be physically instantiated in an artifact for them to have that power. This document is a piece of parchment that has the power to bind a king. That's also an amazing power. I don't think you can properly understand them and their function in history without considering them as physical objects and as artifacts. On a computer screen, all things are the same size. They're the size of your monitor. You don't get that feeling for how they were used in the time period that they were used, what they meant to the people who handled them and read them. Those things are all related to the tangibility of the artifact, and so it's our job to make sure that people can continue to have that experience and learn from the material qualities of the object for the foreseeable future. We've been talking a little bit about how this thing is kind of faded and kind of ripply, and I am reminded of the words of Yoda: "Look this good when 725 years you will not." It's actually a remarkable testament to how well it was made originally, that we do have something we can look at centuries later. I am the curator of pre-1800 materials at Houghton, and very glad to work with things that are actually on really durable materials, and I do not have the problems that the curator of modern books and manuscripts does with things that are on brittle paper, or even worse, like a hard drive. That is a mayfly compared to the durability of parchment. So the job of keeping this around is actually comparatively simple.
I think that's right. And before I ask Leah one final question, I want to tell you that there will be time for a couple questions from the audience. So if you want to start preparing yourself mentally, if you have something you'd like to ask us. We started this conversation by talking about some sort of incorrect ideas. Let's put another one out there. And it's this idea that everything is digitized. Mm-hmm. And I would ask you, is everything digitized? Should it be? And sort of what are your hopes for digitization, First Circuit aside? Yeah.
So yes, it's amazing how many real policy decisions are made around the idea that everything's digitized. And it is absolutely not the case. We've only scratched the surface of items that can eventually be digitized. So absolutely not. It's a little scary, however, how much that thought that everything is digitized by all the way from policymakers to
Brilliant
high school students, thinking that everything is digitized. So there isn't a need to look beyond what they can find online. It's very scary. And right now, not everything is digitized for several reasons. Some things are too fragile. Some things are restricted or legally complex. And some things lack sufficient metadata information about it to give it context. And digitization is a resource-intensive process. It's not just scanning, but it's conservation review and potential mediation in conservation work. And the digitization process, you have to prepare by unfolding, removing fasteners, potentially rehousing the material, analyzing the contents to ensure that restricted materials aren't being flagged. So there's a lot that goes into digitization as a whole. Metadata creation or reuse. There's planning for the long-term care of the digital files. I will say that again. Planning for the public interface. How are you going to make these things available? In the past, in previous places where I have worked on production digitization, I've gone in to speak to the library director and say, people are very nervous about this digitization program because they think you want to digitize everything. And the response was, I do want to digitize everything. So there are people out there who, that is their goal, is to digitize everything. But it can't be done, it has to be done intentionally. It can't be done just without planning for all of these things that I had just mentioned. So the goal is universal access for researchers and learners everywhere, but volume isn't the only goal. Equity and, as I mentioned, the context and usability matter just as much. So in terms of the future of digitization, it involves ever-improving tools, and I will say that naughty word AI. AI digitization is potentially going to be revolutionary in terms of AI having ground truth rather than speculation. And that's going to be incredibly important. AI is also a tool that's going to help the digitization process tremendously. That it's amazing how well AI, for instance, already can read handwriting, which is a holy grail in terms of digitization. It has been for a while. We can do OCR work on typed text, but handwritten text has always been a challenge. AI is very good at it. We need more collaboration across institutions to recombine things that were artificially separated and to make connections that were not really obvious in the past. So not everything is digitized, and not everyone aspires to that goal, but item by item we're working towards that, but with intention. And digitizing everything isn't about scanning it all at once. It's about building a future where every item can be seen, studied, and understood by anyone, anywhere. So seen in that context, I guess the decision about doing everything is what it comes down to. And we digitize so that we can see what is there, but to come back to Debora, we preserve so that we can believe what it is that we're seeing. So.
That's awesome.
What a wonderful thing to say. I think it's important too, even though this conversation is about a 1,300 document, we invest just as much time and energy in our library innovation lab and our institutional data initiative, which had a fantastic conversation last week about AI and the Google Books corpus. And so these things are not happening in isolation of each other. Harvard's not just a preservation unit, as John was talking about modern manuscripts. We're not just thinking backwards, we're also thinking forwards all the time, and that interplay is so important. So I do think we have time for at least one question, and Debbie has a microphone, so she can bring it, and Professor Donohue's going to quiz us perhaps.
Hello? Sorry, it's David Sipe from Boston University. The question I'm asking is, who from Harvard in 1946 was buying manuscripts? It's an interesting time, and I imagine London, the dealer, or something like that. But I have suspicions I know the name, but
I don't know the name. I can say that we got it through a dealer, through Sweet and Maxwell, and in the process of this investigation, sort of discovered that they were really acting as agents for Sotheby's. And I can say that looking at the accession log, it appears to have come in with quite a number of things. And we sort of theorized that this was part of the post-World War II sort of acquisition. There was a lot of acquisition happening at the time.
you don't know if there was a service member who was acting for Harvard?
I think that it was purchased by the library in just a regular way that the library would purchase something. This predates us having a separate historic and special collection, so this would have just been purchased by the Harvard Law School librarians team. And the papers of the librarian don't illuminate on that farther. So I think for us, it's sort of like we saw something special, we liked it, we bought it. And that's as much as we know about that.
And it was at a good price.
It was a great price, not as good as Oxford's, as we were reminded, but very good. We might have time for just one more.
Could I? So I'd like to ask a question of John. The Bog Art Museum has got display capabilities for things that are worth as much as this is. But the Fog Art Museum can't display this because it just isn't set up for that. Do you all at Houghton have the capability of displaying something that's worth this much safely?
I think we would have to have a real conversation about that before we did it, because obviously when something has a high financial valuation, you want to have you want to do that very mindfully. But we do, put very important things on display all the time, and the financial value of things is not the primary reason that we collect things in special collections. It's a historical value that we're concerned about and concerned about preserving. And that is one of our core missions. So yeah, there would probably need to be more consideration given before we did something like that.
Okay, thank you, everyone. So just a couple announcements. There will be a panel discussion regarding the value and not the monetary value of Magna Carta, just at 11 o'clock in this room, moderated by Jonathan Zitran. Speaking to our guests, our wonderful two Magna Carta scholars who are visiting us, Nicholas Benson and David Carpenter, as well as our own dear Harvard Law School professors, Elizabeth Papkamali and Charlie Donahue. And then one thing we're all very excited about, and I hope you come back for at 2:30, is a mock collegiate inter-team debate featuring Mississippi State University's team, who are the national collegiate debate champions. I like saying that. That's a lot of fun to say. And our debaters will include Hannah Daniels, Ben Harvey, Sam Harvey, and Devin Hutchins. And their prompt will be, "The Magna Carta remains a valuable guide for constraining the power of government." So that will be an incredible time. So come back at 2:30 for that as well. And thank you all so much.